Welcome to the Dark Lore, where ancient worlds breathe in the darkness, and every night is a passage into something older than memory. Tonight, the night returns, not to a new place, not to an undiscovered location on Aethermoor's vast and varied map, but to a place he has already been, a place that received him and held him and sent him away with more than he arrived with, and that has been waiting for him to understand enough to return and do what the first visit prepared him for, but could not yet accomplish. The Verdant Reach receives him at its western border the way it receives everything it has decided to receive, without ceremony, without announcement, with the simple opening of a path between the trees that was not there before he arrived, and that closes behind him as he enters, the forest making space for him in the specific way that the Verdant Reach makes space for those it has chosen to admit, not by moving aside, but by being present differently, by rearranging the quality of its presence, to include him rather than exclude him, which is a distinction that those who know the forest understand, and those who do not know it cannot perceive. He enters the Verdant Reach in the last hour before the deep night, when the forest's second deepening is beginning and the silver-gray moss is starting to show the particular luminescence that it shows only in this hour. And the fire that was not burning when he crossed the border is burning when he has walked far enough in that the border is no longer visible behind him. The forest's hospitality extended again to the traveler it recognized as returning rather than arriving for the first time, which changes the quality of the welcome from the cautious welcome of the unknown to the warmer welcome of the already known, the welcome you give to someone you have already assessed and found worthy of your fire. The Verdant Reach's recognition of him is not the recognition of a face, which the forest cannot see in any conventional sense, or of a name, which the forest does not use. It is the recognition of weight and warmth and the specific quality of presence that he carries through the world, which has not changed since his previous visits, but has deepened. The weight slightly different from what it was, heavier in some dimensions and lighter in others. The difference that significant experience makes in how a person is present in a space. The way that people who have understood something important carry themselves differently from people who have not yet understood it. Not visibly, not in any way that most observers would notice, but in the way that very sensitive systems notice, in the way that the Verdant Reach notices. The moss begins its recognition immediately, the silver-gray surface of it showing the faint warmth response beneath his boots that it showed when he pressed his bare hands against it on the previous visit, the moss knowing him by the weight of his footstep, the way a person knows a familiar gait before the person is close enough to be seen. The trees on either side of the path the forest has made for him are larger than the trees at the border. He is already deeper in the Verdant Reach than the path's length would suggest, the forest's distance being different from the distance measured by steps, organized by the logic of purpose rather than the logic of geography, bringing him toward the center at the pace the forest determines rather than the pace he would set for himself. He sees the first ash flower before the fire's light reaches far enough to illuminate the ground clearly. The flower's own faint luminescence visible in the forest's second deepening, a gray-white glow that is the color of ash from a very hot fire, and that pulses very slowly, once every several seconds, in a rhythm that he recognizes after a moment as the same rhythm as the bone in his pack. The warm bone from the dragon's graveyard that has been responding to the proximity of the fragmented came from in a way that increases as he approaches. The ash flower and the bone are in conversation, not in any language he can hear, but in frequency, in the shared rhythm of things that come from or point toward the same source. the same fragment buried beneath the earth of the Verdant Reach, waiting for the person the torn page describes to arrive and retrieve it. He stops before the ash flower and crouches to look at it more closely. The gray-white petals are exactly the color of the ash flower in his pack, preserved perfectly despite the months of travel, and the luminescence of this growing flower and the luminescence of the preserved flower are the same quality of light, the same particular frequency, as though the two flowers are the same flower in different states, one growing from the earth that holds the fragment and one carried by the person who is supposed to find it, connected across the distance by what they both point toward. Beyond this first flower he can see the second, further along the path the forest has made, the same gray-white glow, the same slow pulse. And beyond it, barely visible, a third, the line Riven's map described. He follows the line of ash flowers through the Verdant Reach with the specific quality of attention that following a trail requires, not looking at any individual flower for too long, but keeping the pattern of the line in his peripheral vision, the way tracking is done, with wide soft attention rather than narrow focused attention, the eye registering the whole rather than the parts. The flowers are spaced at irregular intervals that become shorter as he moves deeper into the forest. Near the border they were 100 feet apart, then 80, then 50, and now they are 30 feet apart, and the bone in the pack is noticeably warmer than it was at the border, noticeably warmer than it has been at any point in the journey since the dragon's graveyard. The fragment's warmth reaching it through the earth and through the pack's leather as he approaches the source. The path the forest has made for him follows the line of flowers exactly. The forest knows where he is going and is making the going easier, the trees stepping back from the flower line so that his path is clear and the flowers are visible, and the navigation is as simple as it can be made for a person who is doing something that has never been done before in the current period of Aethermoor's history, which is retrieving a fragment of the Ashen Crown from the place where it has been waiting for the person who was supposed to find it. He makes camp when the flowers lead him to a place where the forest has prepared one, a small clearing, not a natural clearing, but a deliberate one. The trees arranged around a center point at exactly the right distance from each other to create a space that is large enough for a person and a fire and nothing larger. The moss in the center thicker and deeper than anywhere he has seen in the Verdant Reach. The sourceless fire already burning when he arrives at the clearing's edge, burning in its deep forest colors that are unlike ordinary fire. The fire the Verdant Reach provides when it has decided to provide fire. He enters the clearing and the fire's warmth finds him immediately. The omnidirectional warmth of the Verdant Reach's hospitality that comes from the fire and the trees and the moss and the air simultaneously. The warmth of a place that has been prepared for him rather than a place he is imposing on. He sets Ashrender point down in the moss and removes the outer armor and sets it in its organized order beside the sword and sits by the fire with his bare hands on the deep silver moss and the bone in his pack pulsing its warmth so strongly now that he can feel it through the pack's leather without touching it. The fragment close enough that the bone is registering its proximity with everything it has. Tomorrow he will find the fragment. Tonight he rests in the Verdant Reach's prepared space with the ash flower line visible at the clearing's edge, the flowers glowing their slow gray-white pulse in the forest's deep second darkening. Narrative wave, world lore, the forest's preparation. The clearing was not here on his previous visit. He knows this with certainty. He walked through this part of the forest before, following the path the forest made for him toward the first witness, and the ground where this clearing now exists was continuous forest then, of trees and roots and moss, without the deliberate spacing that creates a clearing, and without the particular depth of moss in the center that suggests long preparation. The Verdant Reach made this clearing after his previous visit. In the period between his departure and his return, the forest rearranged itself to create this space, moved its trees by whatever mechanism trees move when the Verdant Reach directs them, deepened the moss, prepared the fire's location, and waited for him to return, knowing he would return because the torn page describes him returning, and the first witness has been growing the crown mark on its root since before Solheim existed, and the Verdant Reach has had the crown mark in its rings since the mark was grown, and has known what the mark means for longer than Aldric has been alive. The forest has been preparing for this night since the previous night he spent here, the night it gave him the correction and showed him the crown mark and sent him away through the corridor to the surface world. It knew what the next steps of the curriculum were, and it prepared the space for when the curriculum was complete, and the carrying of it brought him back to do what the Verdant Reach has been growing a crown mark to show someone how to do. He takes the bone from the pack and holds it in his bare hand, the gauntlet removed, feeling its warmth directly against his skin. The warmth is extraordinary, not hot, not burning, but warm in a way that goes beyond temperature and into something more complex. The warmth of proximity to something significant. The warmth that the earth gives off at the dragon's graveyard where the fragment is buried, and that the bone absorbed through centuries of being in the same valley as that fragment, and that it has been carrying, concentrated and preserved, ever since he picked it up from the silver grass without knowing why. He turns the bone slowly in his hand and watches it in the sourceless fire's light, and notices something he has not noticed before. The bone has a mark on it, not carved, not scratched, but present in the bone's surface in the same way that the crown mark is present in the first witness's root surface, grown there, shaped by the bone's own material over the centuries of its proximity to the fragment, a record in bone of what the bone has been near. The mark is small. He has to hold the bone close to the fire and turn it at exactly the right angle to see it clearly. When he does see it clearly, he recognizes it. The same crown shape, the same 7 points around the central space, but smaller and more worn than the root's version. The bone's version of the same message, both the root and the bone bearing the mark of the crown's fragment in their own material. The earth's material and the dragon earth's material, both showing the same record of proximity to something extraordinary. He arranges all 6 objects on the moss before the fire. The ash flower from the pack, the key with its crown shadow, the bone with its small crown mark, the torn page, the small stone figure from the Black Throne's hall, and beside them Riven's map, unfolded on the moss in the fire's light, showing the line of ash flowers and the fragment's location at the first witness, and the crown's symbol marking the spot. 6 objects and a map, arranged in the order they were found, which is also the order of the journey and the order of the understanding that the journey has assembled. The ash flower glows its gray-white pulse in correspondence with the flowers at the clearing's edge, all of them connected to the fragment, all of them marking its presence from different distances and different positions. The flower in the pack carried all the way from the Verdant Reach to the last hearth and back again, marking the fragment from the road the way the road's flowers mark it from the forest. The bone pulses in rhythm with the flowers, the 2 frequencies not identical but harmonized. The bone's rhythm slightly faster because it is closer, the flower's rhythm slightly slower because it is further, both pointing at the same source with the same certainty from their different positions, and between them and the source, him, the carrier, The person who was always going to arrive at this specific clearing on this specific night with these specific objects and this specific understanding, assembled by the journey in the specific order that the journey assembled it. He thinks about tomorrow with the specific quality of attention he brings to things that require preparation. The fragment is at the first witness, beneath the root that bears the crown mark, beneath the earth that the root grows in, at a depth he does not know, but that Riven's map suggests is not inaccessible. That previous carriers, if there had been previous carriers, could have reached with ordinary tools and ordinary effort. He has no digging tools. He has Ashrender, which is a sword and not a spade, and his gauntlet hands, which are strong and protected and could move earth if the earth is willing to be moved. He has the Verdant Reach, which has been preparing this clearing and this fire and this night for the specific purpose of the retrieval. The forest might help, might move the earth with whatever mechanism it uses to move trees, might make the retrieval easier than ordinary digging would make it. In the way that the Verdant Reach makes things easier for travelers, it has decided to receive by providing fires and paths and warmth that the travelers do not have to create themselves. He does not know what tomorrow will require in detail. He knows its direction, toward the first witness, following the ash flowers line, to the root with the crown mark, to the earth beneath it, to the fragment. The specifics will present themselves the way they always present themselves in Aethermoor, in the moment they are needed, from the place that holds them, to the person who is paying attention. The forest reaches its second deepening around him, the darkness achieving the complete quality that the Verdant Reach's night achieves at this hour, the uniform deep dark that is the forest at its most completely itself, its waking activity suspended and its below-ground activity at maximum, the root network pulsing with the slow breath that is the forest's thinking, the moss luminescent with the warmth that the forest releases when its surface activity is at its minimum and its deep processes are at their maximum. He sits in this deepening with the fire and the objects and the bone's warmth in his hand, and the ash flowers glowing at the clearing's edge, and the fragment close enough to feel through the earth beneath the moss, which is warmer here than at any other point in the Verdant Reach he is camped in. The fragment's warmth adding to the earth's geological warmth and the forest's own warmth to produce a ground temperature that is extraordinary, that rises through the deep moss and into his hands, where they rest on the surface and travels up through his arms and into the undersuit and through the remaining armor and into his body, which receives it with the complete acceptance of something that has been offered exactly what it needs and has stopped being surprised by the precision with which Aethermoor's significant places provide exactly what is needed at exactly the moment it is needed. The first witness is close. He can feel it, or feels something that he attributes to its proximity, a quality of the air that is different from the air elsewhere in the Verdant Reach, denser and older, and carrying in it more of the accumulated breath of the forest's entire history. The air immediately around the oldest and most central tree in the forest having absorbed more of the forest's exhalation over more years than any other air in the Verdant Reach. He has felt this quality before, on his first visit, when the corridor led him toward the tree and he emerged into the space it occupies and felt the change in the air before he saw the tree. He feels it now from the clearing, which is close enough to the first witness that its air has reached the clearing and is present in the atmosphere he breathes. The oldest air in Aethermoor mixing with the forest's second deepening warmth and the fire's warmth and the fragment's warmth from below to produce the specific atmospheric combination of this night, in this clearing with this proximity to the thing that tomorrow will be found and taken and carried forward into whatever comes next. He breathes this air slowly and deliberately, the way he has learned to breathe in Aethermoor's significant places, receiving what the air carries without filtering it through the usual defenses, letting the age of it settle into him along with the warmth and the luminescence of the moss and everything else the Verdant Reach is providing tonight. He looks at Riven's map one more time in the fire's light before he puts the objects away for the night. The map is precise in the way that the Vigil's documentation is always precise. The line of ash flowers shown with the spacing that he has observed corresponds exactly to the spacing he has walked. The distances between flowers on the map matching the distances between flowers on the ground with the accuracy of someone who has walked this path and measured it rather than estimated it. Riven walked this path before him. Of course, the Vigil has known where the fragment is since before Solheim fell, has had the map of the flower line since the documentation was assembled, and Riven's presence in the Verdant Reach while he was here on his first visit. The presence that the old woman in the settlement described as having been in the forest without triggering the forest's alert means that Riven walked the flower line and confirmed the map's accuracy before using it as the thing to give him, which is the Vigil's specific quality. They do not give information without confirming it, do not direct without verifying, do not make contact without knowing that everything they say is exactly true. He is grateful for this quality in a way that goes beyond the utility of the map. He has been walking through Aethermoor with his instincts and the objects and the understanding assembled from the places, and the Vigil has been walking beside him at a distance, confirming what his instincts have been assembling, and the confirmation is not redundant but necessary. A lone traveler on an unprecedented journey needs to know, eventually, that what they have been following is real. He returns the objects to the pack with care: ash flower, key, bone, torn page, stone figure, Riven's map, each in the intersection, organized as always. The bone last because the bone's warmth is strongest, and he holds it longest before returning it, feeling its heat and its small crown mark and its rhythm with the ash flowers at the clearing's edge, and trying to make a memory of this specific feeling. The feeling of holding in his hand the most direct evidence of the fragment's existence and location that he has encountered in the entire journey. More direct than the library's books, and more direct than the first witness's route mark, and more direct even than Riven's map. Because the bone is not a record or a sign or a piece of documentation, but a physical object that has been in proximity to the fragment for centuries and carries that proximity in its material, in the warmth and the mark and the frequency that it shares with the ash flowers, and that will share with the fragment itself when the bone and the fragment are in the same space for the first time since the bone was separated from the dragon's graveyard's earth and put in a traveler's pack on a journey it did not know was the journey that was supposed to carry it here. Narrative wave, character depth, the night before something changes. He does not sleep immediately. This is unusual. In every other resting place on this journey, he has slept with the completeness of someone who has been received by a place and has accepted the reception, the sleep of arrivedness rather than the sleep of transit. Tonight there is a quality of alertness that is not anxiety, not the vigilance of someone expecting danger, but the specific quality of the night before something that cannot be undone. The night before a threshold that is also a point of no return, the night before the first fragment is retrieved and the journey changes from preparation to execution, and the force, which Riven said is months behind his position but not stopped, begins moving toward what he is moving toward. He lies on the deep silver moss with the objects in the pack, and the fire before him, and the ash flowers at the clearing's edge, and tries to let the sleep come at its own pace rather than chasing it or avoiding it. Tries to be in the specific state of non-trying that the monk cell taught him was more productive than trying. Lets the Verdant Reach do what it does and trusts that the sleep will arrive when the conditions have been created for it rather than when he decides it should arrive. The fire burns its deep forest colors and the moss glows its silver warmth, and the first witness breathes its old air into the clearing from its position just beyond the trees, and the ash flowers pulse their gray-white rhythm, and everything is exactly as it should be on the night before the first fragment, which is to say, everything is present and attentive and ready. He is almost asleep when it happens, not sounds. The Verdant Reach does not speak in sounds, but a quality of communication that uses the medium of the forest itself, the moss and the warmth and the below-ground breathing, a communication that bypasses the ear and arrives directly at whatever receives things below the level of language. What it communicates is simple and complete. You are ready. Not encouragement, not reassurance, not the emotional warmth of a comforting message. The specific neutral communication of a system that has assessed the state of the thing it has been preparing and determined that the preparation is complete. The forest made this clearing and provided this fire and maintained the ash flowers line and prepared the moss for the specific purpose of this night, the night before the first fragment. And its communication is the communication of a very precise instrument that has been calibrated for a specific task and is now telling the person who will perform the task that the calibration is complete and the task can proceed. He receives this communication with the gratitude he gives to everything in Aethermoor that works as it was designed to work, specifically and genuinely, and without ceremony. The gratitude of someone who understands what they have been given and values it correctly. And then he sleeps, because the communication was also the signal that the alertness was no longer needed, that the preparation is complete, that what comes tomorrow will be met with everything he has assembled, which is sufficient, which is what he was supposed to bring. The Verdant Reach holds his sleep with the same completeness it held his sleep on the previous visit, the same absolute watch maintained by the forest's distributed awareness, the same commitment to his rest that the forest makes when it has accepted a traveler and decided to hold the watch for them. His sleep is deeper than it was on the previous visit, which was already the deepest sleep he has had outside the dragon's graveyard. Deeper because he is closer to the fragment now, because the bone's warmth is stronger and the ash flower's glow is brighter and the earth beneath the moss is warmer with the fragment's presence. And all of these things contribute to the sleep the way the Verdant Reach's warmth contributes to the sleep, rising through the moss and into the body and encouraging. The depth that the night before something important requires, not the shallow, vigilant sleep of someone who might need to act quickly, but the deep restorative sleep of someone who needs everything they have tomorrow and is being given the rest that ensures they will have it. In the pack, in the dark, while he sleeps, the objects are at their most active conversation. The bone and the ash flower at maximum correspondence, their shared frequency resonating with the fragment beneath the earth, the key warm in a way it has not been warm before, as though it knows it is near the Verdant Reach, but also near the crown's completion in a way that proximity to a single fragment produces that full proximity does not, the first fragment being the one that makes the crowns. Completion a process rather than a possibility, the activation of the sequence. The torn page in the dark is showing something that pages do not ordinarily show, a very faint luminescence of its own, the ink of his own future handwriting responding to the proximity of the moment it describes. The future becoming present in the way that things in Aethermoor sometimes do when the conditions are exactly right for the distance between what is and what will be to collapse momentarily into the same space. The now and the then occupying the same moment. The stone figure from the black throne catches none of this, being only stone, but sits among the other objects with the quality of the beginning it represents, the first stone of the founding, present among the objects of the journey as the founding is present in the crown's completion, not visible in the crown itself, but in everything that made the crown possible. Midnight in the Verdant Reach on this specific night has a quality that midnight in the Verdant Reach did not have on his previous visit. The forest below ground breathing at its minimum. Yes. The moss luminescent. Yes. The ash flowers pulsing their gray-white rhythm. Yes. All the things that midnight in the Verdant Reach always has. But tonight there is something added. Something that is in the quality of the darkness itself, in the specific texture of the deep dark between the trees, a presence that is not any single thing, but the accumulated presence of everything that has been pointing toward this night, toward this clearing, toward this sleep before this retrieval. The ash flower in the pack, and the bone's warmth, and the torn page's future tense, and the first witness's crown mark, and the last hearth's burning, and Riven's map, and the old woman's words, and the black throne's weight, and the monk cell's assembled understanding, and the wandering's key, and the herbalist's first fire. All of it accumulated and present in the quality of the darkness of this specific midnight in this specific clearing in the Verdant Reach. The dark full of the journey that led here, and the dawn full of the fragment that the journey has been leading toward. The hour before dawn, the ash flowers brighten slightly. Not the dramatic brightening of something increasing its output, but the subtle brightening of something responding to the approach of the moment it was grown for. The gray-white luminescence going from its sleeping minimum to something slightly more present, slightly more visible, as though the flowers too are waking, are preparing for what happens when the darkness gives way to the light, and the person sleeping in the clearing wakes, and follows their line to the first witness, and does what the torn page says he will do. The bone in the pack warms by another degree, not hot, still not hot, but warmer than it has been, warmer than he has felt it in the entire journey. The fragment close enough now, and the hour close enough now that the bone is doing everything it can do with the warmth it carries, offering it forward into the darkness of the pack and through the leather and into the clearing where it adds its fraction to the total warmth of the preparation. He wakes before the dawn, not from a sound, not from a change in the fire which has burned to coals as it does each night he has spent in the Verdant Reach, not from any external cause. He wakes because his body has received everything the night has given it and is ready, with the specific readiness of preparation completed, to do what the preparation was for. He lies still for a moment after waking, looking up at the canopy above the clearing where the pre-dawn sky is showing its first barely perceptible differentiation from the deep dark, the gray beginning before the light begins, the announcement of what is coming without the coming yet. He feels the clearing around him in the complete way that he has learned to feel the Verdant Reach, with the whole surface of his attention rather than only with his eyes, the moss warm beneath him, the fire's coals still giving their ember warmth, the ash flowers at the clearing's edge in their slightly brighter luminescence, the bone in the pack at maximum warmth, the first witness's air in the clearing's atmosphere, the forest watching with its distributed and patient attention, everything ready, everything prepared, everything exactly as it needs to be for what comes next. He reassembles the armor in the pre-dawn light with the efficiency of someone who has done this in darkness and will not be impeded by the near darkness of this hour. The shoulder plates with their broken eagle wings, the chest piece with its shattered crown symbol, the gauntlets, the greaves, each piece finding its position with the sounds of things returning to their correct arrangement. He lifts Ashrender from the moss and feels its weight across his back, the weight that has been his constant companion since Solheim, the weight that is so much a part of how he experiences his own body that its absence, in the moments he has removed it in the significant places, has been more noticeable than its presence. He stands in the pre-dawn Verdant Reach clearing, fully armored, the ember-red glow of his visor the first warm light in the clearing now that the fire's coals are barely visible. And he looks at the ash flowers at the clearing's edge and begins to follow their line. The ash flowers lead him through the pre-dawn forest with their gray-white luminescence, brighter than he has seen them at any point, bright enough in the forest's pre-dawn dark that he could follow them without any other light, the line of them clear and direct, pointing toward the first witness with the certainty of things that have been pointing at something for centuries and have developed, in that pointing, an authority that does not require any confirmation. The forest around him is at its pre-dawn quietest. The second deepening is ending, the below-ground breathing slowing toward its minimum, the above-ground activity not yet resumed, the forest in the specific suspended state of maximum transition between the night it has been and the day it is becoming. His footsteps on the moss are the only sound. The ash flowers pulse their rhythm, and he follows it, and the bone in the pack pulses in harmony, and he carries it forward, and the first witness breathes its old air toward him from somewhere ahead, and he breathes it back, and the exchange, the person and the forest, the carried fragment marker and the grown fragment marker, the bone's warmth and the earth's warmth, is continuous and complete as he walks the line toward the oldest tree in Aethermoor and what waits beneath its root. The first witness in the pre-dawn is different from the first witness in the full darkness of the previous visit. Not changed. The tree does not change in any period of time that human experience can register, but visible differently. The pre-dawn light, filtering through the forest canopy at the beginning of its descent toward the floor, catches the tree's bark at angles that the night's darkness and the ember red of his visor could not catch, showing the geological complexity of the bark in a detail that is astonishing even to someone who has stood before this tree before and thought he had seen it. The layers of the bark are decades thick, each layer a record of a specific period of the tree's existence, pressed against the layers before it and the layers after it. The entire history of the Verdant Reach encoded in the material of this single trunk in a depth of record that no library, not even the library of forgotten souls, could contain. He stands at the boundary of the root system and looks at the tree for a long moment before he moves toward the root with the crown mark, paying his respect to the thing he is about to ask something of, which is the appropriate preparation for asking. The root is exactly where he left it. Of course it is. Roots do not move, and the first witness's roots have not moved in any period of time that affects this visit. The crown mark is exactly as he left it. The same 7 points around the same central space. The same warm amber glow of the root's own material expressing the mark. The same quality of having been grown deliberately toward this specific form over an unimaginable period of time. He crouches before the root and looks at the mark in the pre-dawn light and in the ember red of his visor and the ash flower's gray-white pulse, and all of it together shows him something the previous visit's single light source did not show him. The mark is not flat. It has depth. The 7 points of the crown shape are slightly raised from the root's surface, the central space slightly depressed, the whole marked three-dimensional in a way that is not obvious in any single light, but is revealed when multiple light sources at multiple angles illuminate it simultaneously. The crown shape is not carved into the root. It is the root, shaped into this form from within, grown into this three-dimensional expression of the crown's shape from the inside out. The way all growth happens, from the center toward the surface, from the fragment's presence in the earth radiating upward through the root into the bark into the mark that says, "Here, this is the place. This is where the fragment is. This is what it is shaped like. This is what you are looking for." He places both gauntlet hands flat on the earth between the root's edges, on the ground directly beneath the crown mark, and feels what the moss felt when he pressed his bare hands against it on the previous visit: a recognition, an awareness, a response from the earth to his presence that goes beyond the ordinary way that earth responds to pressure. The earth here is different from the earth elsewhere in the Verdant Reach, warmer, denser, with a quality of having been organized around a specific center point for a very long time. The way iron filings organize around a magnet, oriented and ordered by the presence of something at the center that has been there long enough to have made its ordering of the surrounding material permanent. The fragment is directly below his hands, not deep. The earth tells him this, in the way that the Verdant Reach communicates, through warmth and density and the specific quality of response that a system gives when you are exactly on top of what you are looking for. He presses his hands into the earth, and the earth receives the pressure with the giving way of something that has been waiting to give way for a very long time, and is giving way with complete willingness, the specific yielding of prepared earth that has been organized for this purpose and is performing it now. Narrative wave, major event. The retrieval begins. The Verdant Reach helps. He does not ask. It offers, the way it offers everything, without ceremony and without requiring the request. His gauntlet hand touches it, not with his fingertips because he is wearing gauntlets, with the metal of the gauntlet itself, which transmits the contact with a clarity that is extraordinary. The fragment is warm, warmer than the bone ever was, warmer than the dragon's graveyard's earth, warmer than the monk's cell's walls or the last hearth's fire. Warm with the specific warmth of something that was made for a purpose and has been waiting for the person who would fulfill that purpose and is recognizing, in the contact with, the metal of the gauntlet, that the person has arrived. He closes his gauntlet hand around the fragment slowly and carefully, the way you close your hand around something precious and fragile, even if it is neither, and he lifts it from the earth, and the earth releases it with the same willingness with which it released access to it, giving it up completely, and the roots around the area return to their positions with the same slowness and patience with which they moved aside, and the moss rolls back over the earth with the same deliberateness with which it rolled back, and in less time than the removal took the area of the root system looks exactly as it did before he arrived, except that what was beneath the earth is no longer beneath the earth, but in his hand. And what was warm in the earth is now warm in his hand. And what has been waiting for the person the torn page describes has been found by that person, which is the completion of one phase of the journey and the beginning of the next. He opens his hand and looks at the fragment in the pre-dawn light and the ember red of his visor and the ash flower's gray-white glow and the first witness's ambient air and all the light that the Verdant Reach at this hour provides to someone who is standing in it holding what was supposed to be found. The fragment is small, smaller than he expected, not larger than his palm when closed. the size of something that could be carried without being noticed by anyone who did not know what they were looking for. It is the color of ash, the same gray-white as the ash flowers and the ash flower in his pack, a color that is also the color of the crown symbol in the bone's mark and the root's mark and the shattered crown symbol on his chest plate, the color of something that was burned very hot, and what remains is this, the concentrated residue of whatever process produced the crown and its fragments, preserved in this color that is neither white nor gray, but the specific color between them that exists. In ash from a fire that was burning something significant. It is warm in his gauntlet hand with the warmth of everything that has been pointing to it for the entire journey. The bone's warmth, and the ash flower's warmth, and the earth's warmth, and the warmth of the first witness's root, and the warmth of the Verdant Reach itself. All of it concentrated now in this small gray-white piece of what the crown was before it was broken, and before it was distributed, and before it was covered by the earth of the oldest forest in Aethermoor, and waited for him. The first witness responds. He feels it before he sees it, in the quality of the air around him, which changes when the fragment is removed from the earth, not diminishing, not losing the warmth it had, but changing in character, the warmth becoming less localized, more distributed, as though the fragment's removal has released something that was concentrated in one point and is now spreading outward through the forest root network the way warmth spreads through well-connected stone. The crown mark on the root that points to where the fragment was glows, not with the warm amber it has had, but briefly and intensely with a white light that is the color of ash and the color of the fragment and the color of the Verdant Reach when it communicates most directly, the brief white luminescence of confirmation, of acknowledgement, of whatever communication the forest makes to the person who has done what the forest has been growing a crown mark for. It lasts 3 seconds, and then it is gone, the root returning to its ordinary bark color without the mark, which is also gone, not worn away, not scraped off, but simply absent, the way a word disappears from a page when the message it contained has been received, the root having communicated what it needed to communicate and now returning to being a root rather than a sign, a record rather than a direction. The bone in the pack responds to the fragment's presence outside the earth. He can feel the response through the pack's leather, the bone's warmth, which has been steady and warm throughout the journey, intensifies and then immediately settles into a new steady warmth that is warmer than before. The warmth of the bone having done what the bone was apparently carried to do, which was to get itself into the same space as the fragment it came from, which has happened. And the completion of that function is expressed in the warmth that the bone is now producing, a warmth that is now in correspondence with the fragment in his hand rather than in pursuit of it. The bone and the fragment resonating together at the same frequency rather than the bone resonating toward the frequency of the fragment's location. He takes the bone from the pack and holds it in one hand with the fragment in the other and feels the two warmths correspond. Feels the shared frequency that the bone has been carrying since the dragon's graveyard, and that the fragment has been carrying since it was placed in the earth of the Verdant Reach. The same frequency from the same source. The crown's material recognizing itself across the different forms it has taken in the objects he has been carrying. He places the fragment in the inner section of the pack beside the other objects. The bone first, then the fragment beside it, then the ash flower from the pack, which he unfolds and places in contact with the fragment, because the flower and the fragment are in the deepest correspondence of all the objects. The flower grown from the earth that was warm with the fragment's warmth. The flower's gray-white color the color of the fragment itself, the flower that was placed in his pack by unknown. Hands on the night before he left the Verdant Reach on the first visit, when the forest or the vigil or something that understood what was needed placed the ash flower there to ensure that he would carry the fragment's marker with him through every subsequent stop of the journey and bring it back here, to this forest, to this root, to this earth, where the fragment was waiting. The flower in contact with the fragment glows slightly brighter, the gray-white luminescence increasing very subtly, the response of something that has been apart from what it came from and has been returned to proximity with it, the reunion of marker and source in the small space of the pack's intersection surrounded by the key and the torn page and the stone figure and Riven's map. The fragment, the newest addition to the set and the first edition that is an actual piece of the Ashen Crown, rather than an object that points toward it. He sits at the base of the first witness, at the boundary of the root system, at the exact edge of the threshold he did not cross on the previous visit, and holds the pack with the fragment inside against his chest with both arms, the gauntlet arms crossing over the pack the way arms cross over something you want to protect, not from any specific threat, but from the general vulnerability of precious things in a world that has been demonstrating for his entire journey that precious things require carrying with care. The fragment is the first piece of the Ashen Crown retrieved by anyone in the current period of Aethermoor's history. This is not a dramatic thought. It arrives with the same quiet authority with which everything significant arrives in Aethermoor, without announcement, without the fanfare that the surface world would attach to something of this magnitude. The fragment was found. It is carried now. The next phase of the journey has begun. The Verdant Reach breathes around him in the morning light that is now filling the forest, the canopy above showing the specific quality of early morning light in the Verdant Reach that he observed on the morning of his previous visit, the transitional color between the forest's nighttime depth and its daytime richness, the color that shows both simultaneously. Narrative wave, mystery event. The torn page responds. He takes the torn page from the pack and unfolds it in the morning light, and looks at the handwriting that is his own but was not written by him, and sees something he has not seen before. The mid-sentence ending is different. The sentence does not end in the same place it has ended in every reading since he found it in the library. There are words after the previous stopping point, new words, in the same handwriting, that were not there before and that are there now, as though the sentence has continued writing itself in the period since the last time he read it, as though the future that the page is recording has moved forward by the precise amount that his actions have moved it forward, and the new words are the record of that advance. He reads the new words. They describe him standing at the root of the first witness holding the pack with the first fragment inside it, looking at the page, reading these words. The page is recording this moment as it happens, is writing itself in his hand, and in his position, and in the morning light of the Verdant Reach, and in the pack with the fragment against his chest, writing the present moment into the future tense, because the present moment is the moment the future tense was describing. He looks at the page, and the page looks back at him with the authority of a document that has been waiting to reach this specific sentence since it was placed in the library for him to find. And the sentence is not finished yet, and the next words will be written when the next thing happens that is worth recording, which means the page is not a record of a fixed future, but a record of a future that is being written by his actions, each action adding to the sentence until the sentence is complete. The morning of the Verdant Reach arrives fully, and the forest shows its daytime colors, the silver-gray moss becoming its deep, rich green, the dark bark of the trees showing the browns and umbers and occasional flashes of amber, that daylight reveals and wood that nighttime darkens to uniform black, the canopy above filtering the morning light into the same long amber columns he observed on the first visit. The specific quality of Verdant Reach daylight that is different from daylight anywhere else in Aethermoor, warmer and more patient. The light of a place that has been receiving daylight for long enough to have developed a relationship with it, to receive it with the same attentiveness that the forest receives everything. He sits at the boundary of the first witness's root system in this daylight with the pack against his chest and the fragment inside it, and the torn page in his hand, and the new words in the future tense that are recording this morning, and he understands, with the same completeness that understanding arrives in Aethermoor, that the morning is different from every other morning of the journey because it is the morning after the first fragment, which means it is the first morning of the crowns. Completion, which means everything that comes after this morning is different from everything that came before it. Different in the way that the time after the first stone is placed in the first city's first wall is different from the time before it. The beginning having been made, the founding having been accomplished, the continuation now possible in a way that it was not possible before the first stone. He takes inventory of what the Verdant Reach has given him on this second visit, as he takes inventory each morning of the journey's gifts. The fragment, which is the obvious and primary gift, the thing the visit was for, and that the previous visit prepared him for. The new words on the torn page, which are the gift of confirmation that the page records his actions and that the future it describes is being written by those actions rather than fixed independently of them, which means he has more agency in what comes than he understood, that the torn page is not a prophecy, but a record of a possible future that becomes actual with each action he takes toward it. The Verdant Reach's second act of receiving, which is different from the first act in its quality. The first visit received him as something unknown, assessed him, found him worthy. The second visit received him as something known, assisted him, participated in the retrieval in a way that the forest's cooperative opening of the earth shows. This is the specific quality of the second visit's gift, not information or objects but relationship. The change from the Verdant Reach receiving a traveler to the Verdant Reach working with a traveler toward a shared purpose, the purpose of the fragment's retrieval, which the forest has been oriented toward since the first witness grew the crown mark and the ash flowers began growing in their line, and the earth organized itself around the fragment's warmth and prepared to release it to whoever came to receive it. He knows the next stop from Riven's information and from what he has assembled from the journey. The Deadlands, the Dragon's Graveyard, the fragment below the valley floor, below the configuration of bones that forms the gate key when seen from the right altitude at the right time of year. The Vigil's survivors will be waiting at an inn on the Amber Roads with the information about how to access the fragment below the valley floor. The specific technical knowledge of the gate mechanism that the Vigil has preserved from the documentation assembled before Solheim's fall. He will walk the Amber Road south from the Verdant Reach toward the Deadlands, and he will find the inn that is fully operational when everything around it is declining, and the Vigil's survivors will be there, and they will tell him what he needs to know to retrieve the second fragment. And then he will go to the Dragon's Graveyard and do what he did here, what the journey has been preparing him to do. And the second fragment will be retrieved, and the crown's completion will be 2 fragments, closer to what it needs to be. He stands from the root boundary and lifts Ashrender from where it has been standing point down in the earth during the retrieval and returns it to his back, and feels the familiar weight of it settle across his shoulders, and looks at the first witness one more time before he turns away from it, this time for the last time. this time in the knowledge that he will not return here again on this journey, because what the Verdant Reach had to give him, he has received, and what he had to do here, he has done. And the next thing is elsewhere on the map that the journey is making of Aethermoor by the specific trajectory of his path through it. The first witness does not mark his departure in any visible way. It does not respond to his leaving as it responded to the crown mark's purpose being fulfilled. No white light, no communication, simply the tree being what it is, enormous and ancient and patient and completely continuous, doing what it has done for longer than any current measurement of time applies to. But he feels its attention on him as he moves away. The same quality of being watched by something that uses entirely different instruments of perception, the quality he noticed the first time he stood before it, and that he has never fully stopped noticing since. The Verdant Reach releases him from its western border with the same quality with which it received him, without ceremony, without announcement, with the simple closing of the path behind him that was open for his passage, and that closes when the passage is complete. He crosses the border from the forest into the plain beyond, and the quality of the air changes immediately, back to the ordinary quality of Aethermoor's atmosphere outside the Verdant Reach, and the forest behind him is simply the forest, a wall of dark trees at the edge of the plain, looking exactly as it looks to anyone who passes this border, impenetrable and indifferent, and giving no sign of what it contains or what has just occurred within it. The fragment in the pack is warm against his back. The bone is warm beside it. The ash flower that was placed in his pack by whoever placed it, months ago, on the night he left the forest on the first visit, is still in the pack, preserved and glowing its gray-white pulse at a frequency that is now in full correspondence with the fragment rather than in pursuit of it. The marker and the marked in the same place at the same time, the flower's purpose fulfilled. Its preservation, now the preservation of what it led him to rather than the leading itself. He walks the amber road south toward the Deadlands and the dragon's graveyard with the fragment in his pack, and the first morning of the crown's completion behind him, and everything that comes next ahead of him, which is the retrieval of the Deadlands fragment and whatever the Vigil survivors will tell him about the gate mechanism and the specific technical knowledge of how to access what is below the valley floor. The amber road's amber luminescence in the daylight, faint as always but present, accompanies him south the way it accompanied him north, the maintained connection between the places he has been and the places he is going, the road doing what the road does, linking what needs to be linked, maintaining what needs to be maintained, carrying who needs to be carried toward where they need to go. The journey has changed. He felt this change in the Verdant Reach the moment the fragment was in his hand, and he feels it now on the road, walking south with the fragment and the bone corresponding in the pack, and the torn page adding words as he acts, and the ash flower glowing its correspondence rather than its pursuit. The journey is no longer the journey toward the beginning of the crown's completion. It is the journey of the crown's completion. This is the specific difference that the first stone makes in any founding. The possibility becomes actuality, the potential becomes momentum, the direction becomes movement. He has been pointed toward this for the entire journey, pointed by the objects and the places and the curriculum of the stops. And now he is not pointed toward it, but doing it, not approaching but arrived, not preparing but acting, and the quality of the walking on the amber road south reflects this change. The same footsteps, the same road, the same gray honest sky of Aethermoor's plain. But underneath all of it, the specific quality of someone who has crossed a threshold and knows it and is, carrying what they found on the other side of it forward into whatever comes next. He camps on the amber road south as he camped on the amber roads north, on the road's edge with the road's warmth beneath him and the road's luminescence above him and the stars in their road map pattern showing the network of the road's cities in the sky. The fire he builds from the road's own scraps is ordinary fire, not the sourceless fire of the Verdant Reach and not the eternal candle of the monk's cell. Just an ordinary road traveler's fire built from available material, because the road does not provide hospitality the way the significant places provide it. The road's hospitality being the road itself, the maintained surface and the slight warmth and the amber luminescence. The passive hospitality of infrastructure rather than the active. Hospitality of places that were built or grown with intention. He arranges the objects from the pack beside the fire and looks at them in the firelight. 7 objects now, the fragment the 7th, the newest and the most significant, and the one that changes the character of the set from objects that point toward the crown to objects that include a piece of the crown, the first inclusion. The beginning of the assembly that the torn page describes and the vigil's knowledge predicts, and the last hearth's fire has been burning toward. He holds the fragment in the firelight one more time before sleep and looks at it with everything he knows that the first finding brought him. The gray-white color of ash from a very hot fire. The warmth that goes beyond temperature into the warmth of recognition. The small size that belies the significance. The quality of material that has been in one place for centuries and carries in it the specific character of that place. The Verdant Reach's earth, the ash flowers that grew from that earth. The warmth that the first witness registered in its root and expressed in the crown mark. All of it in this small piece of what the crown was before it was broken and distributed across Aethermoor by whoever broke it and distributed it with the intelligence to put it in places that would protect it until the right person came to retrieve it. He puts the fragment back beside the bone and closes the pack and lies down on the road's warm stone and pulls the dark cape around him, and the ember-red glow of his visor illuminates the underside of the dark cape with its red-orange warmth, and he breathes the amber road's honest air and watches the stars in their road map pattern above him, and the fire he built from the road's scraps burning its ordinary warmth before him, and lets the ordinary road sleep arrive at its own ordinary pace, which it does, the sleep of a traveler who has done today what today required, and is ready for tomorrow to require whatever it requires. The hour before dawn on the amber road south has the same quality as the hour before dawn on the amber roads north. The road at its most luminescent, the accumulated light of all the torches ever carried along it concentrated in the deepest darkness before the day. The road's maximum warmth before the morning begins, and the stone starts absorbing the day's sunlight rather than releasing the night's stored warmth. He sleeps through this hour with the completeness of the first fragment sleep, the deep restorative sleep of someone who has done something irreversible and is carrying it forward in the only way irreversible things can be carried, which is onward, without the possibility of return, with the specific freedom of someone who has crossed the threshold and left the other side of it permanently behind. He wakes on the amber road south in the first gray light of the morning after the first fragment, with the Deadlands ahead and the Dragon's graveyard ahead, and the Vigil's survivors at an inn on the road ahead, and everything that the next phase of the journey requires ahead. And behind him, the Verdant Reach and the first witness and the crown mark that is no longer on the route because its message has been received, and the ash flower line that is still there because it will be there until the earth that grew it no longer contains what it was grown to mark, which it no longer does, and the clearing where the fire was and the moss was prepared, and the forest made space for the specific night that was needed, which it will allow to grow back over now that the night has passed and the space is no longer needed. He stands and lifts Ashrender and lifts the pack with the fragment and the bone and the flower and the key and the page and the stone figure and the map. Everything that the journey has given him to carry, and he walks south on the amber roads toward whatever the Deadlands have to give the next stop of a journey that has begun in earnest, that has crossed from preparation into execution, that is now the crown's completion rather than the crown's pursuit. Sleep well, traveler. The first witness grew its mark before you were born and waited for you to arrive, and has let the mark go now that you have. This is what the oldest things do. They prepare and they wait and they release. And the releasing is as important as the preparing, and the waiting, which is the longest part, is what makes the releasing possible.